Welcome to the Tears and Miracles podcast, an audio diary of a young woman who is a follower of Christ, called to hear from the Lord and share with the world. Tune in regularly to hear the latest episode, and you can also find her content on YouTube under the same name, Tirza Miracles. Welcome back. You're listening to episode 6. Wow, I can't believe we've already made it this far. I hope that the words that I have been providing you in previous episodes, that they have encouraged you. And as I said, it's always just what I feel led and prompted by the Lord to share with you. So I hope that they are a blessing to you. So for today, I will be sharing with you what I received on February 12th. And I'll just jump into the word, into what I wrote down from that day. So on the morning of February 12th, I felt led to read from the book of 1 Kings chapter 11 to 12, and specifically from chapter 11 verses 26 until the end of chapter 12. And as I did so, I immediately remembered that the Lord had me read this a few weeks back, so the story was still fresh on my mind. It is a retelling of how Solomon's heart was turned from the Lord and how he began to worship the gods of his wives. He did not follow the Lord fully like his father David, and God had warned him about this, but he continued on. So in this chapter, God tells him that he will take away his kingdom and give it to his servant, leaving him only one tribe. But for David's sake and for Jerusalem's sake, which he had chosen to put his name there, he would not do that in his days, that is in Solomon's days, but in the days of his son. So if you read the first part of chapter 11, you will see that as soon as God had pronounced this over Solomon, he began to raise up an adversary against him, actually several. The first one was called Hadad the Edomite, and then there was Rezin the son of Eliada, I'm sure I'm butchering their names, and Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So as I mentioned, I had read about this story a few weeks back, so when I turned to this passage, I recognized it. So starting from verses 26, this is where the story of Jeroboam starts, and we learn that he was the son of one of Solomon's servants, and his mother was a widow. And Jeroboam is said to be a strong and capable man who was very industrious, and Solomon had set him over the house of Joseph, as it says in this passage. So one of the things that I found interesting is that although we learn later on that he was a very wicked person, this Jeroboam, in the early days, God actually had sent him a prophet named Ahijah, and told him that God had given him 10 of the 12 tribes, and the reason for doing so. And this part of the story starts from verses 29 of chapter 11. Actually, I'll just start from verse 28. And the man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing the young man that he was industrious, he made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. And it came to pass at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him in the way, and he had clad himself with a new garment, and they two were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it in 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, Take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, Behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have 1 tribe, for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake. the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. Because that they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon, and have not walked in my ways, to do that which is right in mine eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David his father. And if you read verse 37, it says, And I will take thee, and thou shalt reign according to all that thy soul desireth, and shalt be king over Israel. And it shall be, if thou wilt hearken unto all that I command thee, and wilt walk in my ways, and do that is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, that I will be with thee, and build thee a sure house, as I built for David, and I will give Israel unto thee. So here we see that even though God knew that Jeroboam would not be a righteous man in the end, we still see that he gave him that option to follow him. Then we read on that Solomon somehow found out about this, and he was planning to kill Jeroboam. So Jeroboam fled to Egypt, where he remained until Solomon died. Then we learn that Jeroboam made his way back to Israel when he had heard of Solomon's death, and that Solomon's son Rehoboam was about to be made king. So he came to the place where, I guess you'd say, the inauguration would be happening, and the rest of Israel was with him. It seemed like already he had become a sort of leader to the Israelites. And so he posed a question to Rehoboam, whether he would lighten the bondage that Solomon had put them under. So remember here that Jeroboam's father was Solomon's servant. So after posing this question, we learned that Rehoboam sought for advice, first with the older men who were his father's age, and then from his own age mates. And it's unfortunate that he chose the advice of his friends and ended up making a huge blunder. And so the response that Rehoboam gave the men of Israel and Jeroboam was that instead of lessening the burden his father Solomon had placed on them, he would actually make it worse. So verses 13 we read, And the king answered the people roughly, and forsook the old men's counsel that they gave him, and spake to them after the counsel of the young men, saying, My father made your yoke heavy, and I will add to your yoke. My father also chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. Wherefore the king hearkened not unto the people, for the cause was from the Lord, that he might perform his saying, which the Lord spake by Ahijah the Shilonite unto Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Then we read that the people of Israel were discouraged, and basically the kingdom ended up being split. So Rehoboam reigned over Judah, but the rest of Israel set up Jeroboam as their king, just as the Lord had said. The unfortunate thing that happened is that Jeroboam, for his own selfish reasons, he realized that if the Israelites continued to go up to Jerusalem to worship, there was a chance that their heart would be turned back to God, and that they would return to Rehoboam, who was their legitimate king. So he devised a plan to make sure that this would not happen. So we read from verses 26 to 28 of chapter 12. And Jeroboam said in his heart, Now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam king of Judah, and they shall kill me, and go again to Rehoboam king of Judah. Whereupon the king took counsel, and made 2 calves of gold, and said unto them, It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And he set the one in Bethel, and the other put he in Dan. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. And he made an house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi. And Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, like unto the feast that is in Judah, and he offered upon the altar. So did he in Bethel, sacrificing unto the calves that he had made. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places which he had made. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised in his own heart, and ordained a feast unto the children of Israel. And he offered upon the altar and burnt incense. So that is where I stopped reading that morning. Then, as I was thinking about why I had been led to read this passage again, I recalled that a few weeks before, the Lord had been speaking to me about false worship and that it's an issue in the church today. So after reading all that, the question in my mind was, why did he revisit this again? And not too long after, this is the response that I heard in my spirit and wrote down. Because this is what is going on in the present day. The church is given over to false worship because they have forsaken me, the fountain of living water. So then I gave them up to their own lusts. Here he reminded me of Romans 1 verses 24, which says, Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. And then he continued to say, And then because they are given over, of course they add sin to sin. Sin breeds more sin, as you saw, referencing 1 Kings chapter 11 and 12. It started with Solomon, who had given such wisdom that there was never a man like him. But his heart was turned away from me, and he went to other gods, which are no gods, but devils. After all I had given him, his heart was turned away from me, the fountain of living water, and he went after other gods, which are no gods, works of wood and stone. Abomination is he that chooseth you. I looked this up after, and it's a verse from Isaiah 41 verses 23 to 24, which says, Show the things that are to come hereafter, that we may know that ye are gods. Yea, do good or do evil, that we may be dismayed, and behold it together. Behold, ye are of nothing, and your work of naught. An abomination is he that chooseth you. So to get back to what I was hearing in my spirit. So Solomon's heart was turned, and my anger was kindled upon him, that I pronounced a curse on my people, to split the kingdom. All but one tribe was taken away by a wicked man. I gave them up. Of course, what happens is what inevitably happens when something is left on its own. Just like if you leave a piece of fruit and don't put it in the fridge, it begins to decay. The natural laws kick in. It is the same with my presence. As my presence leaves, my blessing and protection is taken away, and what remains is decay and a lack of blessing and protection. When I take my hand away, they are destroyed. When I have my hand over a people, they are protected. They are also made aware of the ways that they can keep their blessing, which is by walking in my ways and abiding under my rule. They forsake me, they forsake life. They go after broken cisterns that can hold no water. And later on I found that this is a verse from Jeremiah 2 verses 13, which says, For my people have committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters, and hewed them out cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. So getting back into the journal entry, this is why I keep telling you, the way to maintain your blessing is to come to me. If people neglect me, they do so to their own hurt. Since with me is all power to bless. So the reason I wanted you to read this passage in 1 Kings chapter 12, it is a second time, it is to let you know, and others that will hear from you, that when people go away from me, they choose other ways and not my ways, then inevitably they will receive the just consequences of their actions. If the fruit doesn't make it into the fridge, it will decay and start rotting. So is anyone who rejects me, the fountain of living water, and chooses false worship. They may claim they are worshiping me, even quote me or my word, say they are worshiping me, but their heart is far from me. The effect is that I will not be among them, and at the removal of my presence, anything is possible. All manner of evil can happen because my hand of protection is not there anymore. I am saying this in warning. Return to the source, my people. Return to your God, the one who blesses you, the one who guards you, the one who has been your help throughout your life. Don't go after false gods, after men, after wealth, after being liked by others, after false ideas of who I am. Read my word for yourself. Don't go after the leaders. Follow me instead. I will teach you in the way that you should go. No need to seek other things or other people. Simply come to me. It is a decision everyone should make in their own heart, whether to follow me or follow after their own ways, their own gods. I want you to share this too as a word for this season. Sin breeds sin. Neglecting me only invites others to come in. When the heart is vacant, other spirits will make their abode, and the last state is worse than the first. So here you can refer to Luke chapter 11 verses 24 to 26, which says, "When the unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places seeking rest, and findeth none. He saith, I will return unto mine house whence I came out. And when he cometh, he findeth it swept and garnished. Then goeth he, and taketh to him 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first." So I want to warn my people about false worship. Really ask yourself, if the God I am claiming to worship was sitting visibly in front of me, they don't realize I can see them, although they can't see me. But if I was visibly sitting in front of them, would they dare do what they do to my face? This is what I was speaking to you about. Willing ignorance. Here he reminded me of a passage that I had come across a few days earlier in the book of 2 Peter, which speaks to the idea of people suppressing the truth and therefore being willingly ignorant. So he went on to say, "Well, they shall reap the consequences if they do not turn." Even with Solomon, I warned him of his idolatrous practices, but he went on. And so my heart was turned from him and from his kingdom, leaving only a remnant. It is the same story over and over. That is why the first commandment is to love the Lord your God and only cling to him, because he is your life and well-being. Disobey this command and reap the consequences. It is the same story over and over. So I want you to speak this out and warn my people about false worship, which is pretending to be my people, pretending to love my ways, but your heart is far from me. If people on a human level are able to tell when their relationships amongst each other have gone sour, how is it that they can deceive themselves about their relationship with me? It is willful ignorance, because they love their own ways too much. Well, they will receive the just consequence of their action. That is all for today. Please speak this message for me. And so that was the end of the message. And so I'll leave it there for today. And if I have another word to share with you in the future, I'll be sure to join you again for another episode. So until next time, take care and God bless.